Hi, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to talk to you about the cost of a loft conversion. If you've seen our channel, you'll know that we've got a lot of videos about loft conversions on there. And one in particular has been very popular, and that's the 18-day loft conversion from start to finish. So that was the one that we really focused in on, tried to make sure we did it as quickly as possible. And we got it from start to finish in 18 days, which was great. And I've had a lot of questions from people wanting to know how much it costs. A lot of people are thinking about doing their own loft conversion, and it's really useful to have a guide as to how much things cost. So I'll give you a breakdown of all of the different parts of the loft conversion, and I'll talk to you about how you can go about saving some money and the things that you can do to make sure you get your costs down to the lowest possible point. Before we get into all of that, if you could give me a thumbs up and subscribe, then that would be great. Okay, so I've split the costs for the loft conversion into 4 different sections, and we'll go through each one of those, and then we can have a chat at the end about how to go about saving some cost and how you can do things that will really help you to minimize the amount of cash that you have to spend. So the first section we're going to talk about is planning. So planning's not very exciting because it isn't actually starting your loft conversion, but it is an essential part of every single loft conversion, and you need to make sure you do everything by the book. Otherwise, you may have problems further down the road. So the very first thing that you need when you're thinking about your loft conversion are some drawings. So these are the drawings that you submit to the council that show the council exactly what it is that you want to build. So you need to find an architect and you need to ask them to prepare the drawings for you. So there isn't a fixed price for this sort of work. Every architect will charge a different amount. So you really need to shop around, get a good deal and negotiate the best possible price. And what we did on the 18-day loft conversion is we had a look on the planning register and we found an architect who'd recently had a loft approved for the house over the road. And we contacted him and asked him if he was interested in doing the plans for our house. And then we got him down to a price of £1,000. So the first cost on the board today is £1,000 for the architect's drawings. Now, unfortunately, you have to pay VAT on top of that. He was VAT registered, so that meant that he was earning more than £60,000 or so in his practice. So he charged us VAT, which is 20%. So it was £1,000 for his fees and then another 20%, which is £200. So that was £1,200, the total cost for those drawings. We then had to submit those drawings to the council, and there's a fee payable for that. And the fee for that was £203. No VAT, thankfully, just £203. We got planning permission from the council, which was great. The next thing that we needed to do was get some structural drawings and calculations. So the drawings that the architect puts together is basically just an outline of what it is that you're drawing. It just shows a visual representation of what it'll look like from the outside and what the floor plan looks like. That isn't good enough for a builder to use to actually construct the loft. So you need to get a structural engineer to convert the architect's plans into structural drawings, which basically have all the details about what steel beams you need, what trusses you need, what timber sizes you need to factor in, all of the detail for the build. So it's an ABC guide for the builder to tell him exactly how to construct the loft. So the structural engineer has to look at the load and the capacity and lots of different factors when they are drawing up their drawings and calculations. So it's very similar to the architect's discussions. There is no fixed price for this. You need to find somebody and then get them down on the price. Now we went on to one of the search engines and you can put in, find me a structural engineer. It will then give you lots of options. We phoned 5 or 6 and we got a very good deal from a really good guy who charged us £600 for his work. You then have to give those structural drawings to building control, and building control is either the council run team, which is part of the planning department in councils, or you can go to a private company and pay them. We went with the council because it's slightly cheaper and the council do a good job, and that's a fixed price for that service. It was £487.50 plus VAT, which meant that the total cost was £585. And the final piece of planning paperwork that we had to pay for was the party wall agreement. So if you're building a loft in a property that is adjoined to another house, so it's either semi-detached or terraced, then you will have to enter into party wall discussions with your neighbour and put a party wall agreement in place in the worst case scenario. So we found a guy on the internet and he was offering a fixed price to do the service. So we managed to get a party wall agreement and all of the letters and all of the paperwork done for £350 plus VAT. So it was £420 in total. So the total cost for all of the planning and paperwork that we had to pay out was £3,168.60. So we had to spend all of that before we'd started any of the work. So you need to factor in these paperwork costs. It's a really important part of the build and you have to make those payments. Now, we negotiated quite good deals with the architect and the structural engineer, and I would encourage all of you to do that. You need to shop around. You need to find somebody who you think's good, but is also offering you a good price, because there are people out there who will rip you off. I've heard of people paying £5,000 for plans, £2,000 or £3,000 for structural engineers' drawings. You don't need to do that. At the end of the day, you know what you want in your loft. They're not designing a house from scratch. It's relatively straightforward designing a loft. So don't pay through the nose. Don't pay too much for the paperwork. Do what you need to do. Pay people a decent price, but make sure you keep the costs down from your side. Okay, so the second part of the costs was the shell structure. So when you're building a loft, the first part of the build is the shell structure. And that is basically the creation of the space. So it's the removal of your existing roof, disposal of all those materials, the insertion of the steels that are needed to spread the load and support the new structure, and then the timber frame that you're constructing, which will be the new dormer, and then all of the finish on that. So the roof covering on top of that timber frame, the windows that are going into that, the tiles that will be hung on the side. So basically getting you to a watertight structure. So it's just the shell. So it doesn't include your electrics and plumbing and any of the internal finishes. So we agreed a price for the shell, and then we had a separate price for everything else. So the price of the shell for this property was £20,000. So it was a fixed figure, a fixed price that included all the materials and all the work. The detail on the build was included in the architect's plans, so they knew the size of the windows and how high the roof was and all of those factors. And so they included the cost of creating that structure for £20,000. However, that wasn't the final price because we had to pay VAT on top. So there's a recurring theme here. You have to pay VAT on top of all of these prices. So the £20,000, 20% of that was £4,000. So we had to pay a total of £24,000 to the builder for the creation of the shell. The next part of the build was the internal works. So this is all of the first fix and second fix and basically the full finish of the property. So it's putting all the electric cables, all the plumbing pipework in, and then it's everything else. So all of the plastering, the plasterboard, the insulation, the flooring, everything that you can see and touch in that property, the builders have to do that. So they're charging you for their time and labour. They will provide some of the materials. So in this situation, they provided all of the actual building materials. So the insulation was provided, the chipboard flooring, so the basic finish was provided, and all of the plaster was provided. So they fitted everything, all the cabling, all the pipe work, they plastered everything. So all of those materials were included and the labour was included as well. So the total price that we agreed with the builder for the internal works was £20,000 as well. So that was £20,000 plus VAT. So another £24,000 for the internal works and the finish. And the final part of the costs that we had to include were the fixtures and fittings. So this is basically everything that you see and touch in the property that's personal choice. So it was the shower controls, the shower head, the sink, the toilet, the vanity unit, the radiator, the shaver socket, the light switches, the door handles, the doors themselves. So basically everything that is a personalized finish, you have to buy and supply to your builder. It isn't included in the price. So the total cost of that was £6,000, and that's the actual gross figure. So 6,000 is what we paid. If we were working it backwards, it would be £5,000 plus VAT. But basically the £6,000 was what we paid when we bought those things off the internet. So it was the actual all-in price. So where does that get us to? What was the total cost of this build? Well, the total cost was £57,168. However, included in that figure was £9,528 of VAT. So if we hadn't have had to pay that VAT, the actual cost would have been £47,640. Now, that's a really important learning point for anybody who is doing a loft conversion. Because if you can do any of the work yourself, then firstly, you won't have to pay the builders for doing that work. But secondly, you won't have to pay the VAT. So it really does help you if you can do some of the work yourself. So for example, what we could have done on this build was we could have paid the builder just to build the shell, and then we could have done the internal fit out ourselves. So we could have finished off the plumbing and the electrics and done the plastering and everything else ourselves. And that would have saved us a lot of money. And it also would have meant we didn't have to pay any of the VAT. But we wanted to get things done quickly and easily, so we just agreed an all-in price. Because the danger of doing things yourself is that it will take a lot longer. And unless you're skilled, unless you know what you're doing, then the finish might not be quite what you're looking for. So if you want to get it done quickly and professionally, then get the builders to do it. If you've got the skills and the time, then you should think about doing it yourself, because you'll definitely be able to save some money. So that's probably the learning point that I want to leave you with, is that there's a lot of VAT that you will have to pay when you're building a loft. You'll have to pay an extra 20% to the builder for everything that they do. So if you can try and avoid that, then that keeps your costs down. So that's something that you can think about. Think about how you can avoid that VAT, and that will really help keep your costs down. So hopefully that's been useful and given you a better understanding as to what the costs involved in this sort of finish are. The finish that we included on that loft was quite high end. You could do it for a lot less, but we were going for a high end finish that looks really great. If you haven't checked it out, please check out the video. I've got a link for it here. You'll be able to see exactly what finish we applied and what the final structure looked like. And it was also a very big loft. So if you've got a much smaller property, then it will probably come in a lot less than the price that we had to pay. But hopefully that's been useful, giving you a better understanding as to what costs are involved. If you've liked what I've said, please give me that thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you again soon.